Hi, my name is Sakari Tolppanen. Welcome to learn about sustainable energy. Today our guest is Dr. Kati Miettunen from Aalto University. She is an expert in solar power and she is currently working in a research group specialized in new energy technologies. She has written dozens of scientific publications on solar energy with a primary focus on dye-sensitized solar cells. Furthermore, she has been strongly involved in creating this course on sustainable energy. It is great to have her here with us today and hear what she has to say about solar power. Kati, welcome to the studio with us today. Today we'll be talking about solar panels and solar energy, and you're an expert in that field, so it's great to have you here today. My first question is, how should solar cells or solar panels be developed so that they would become more economically feasible?
The most important thing is to look at the price of the solar cells. So the efficiencies are probably not going that much higher in the future, especially in the conventional technologies. But the idea is to make the conventional cells in a cheaper way, and also look at new type of cells that potentially could be made in radically much cheaper way.
So what are some of these new technologies that we should be looking into?
For instance, dye solar cells, perovskite cells have made great success in the latest years in regards of efficiency.
Okay, and so solar energy has become more and more popular around the world. So which parts of the world is solar energy economically feasible currently?
For instance, in Italy, the electricity from the grid is the same price as electricity from photovoltaics. So in there, it's kind of economically justified to have solar power. But even in Finland, if you have a location without a grid connection, for instance, a summer cottage, which is used mainly during summertime, so in those cases, it might be significantly cheaper to get solar panels and also a battery to produce the electricity and to get a constant production.
Okay, so you mentioned Italy, and you mentioned that there the price is the same already as it would be to produce energy through other means. So why isn't solar energy more popular there currently than it could be?
Well, you have to buy the panels, and you might have to buy some other things as well if you would like to have a battery, if you use it mainly for your own usage. But even the solar cells as such, the installation cost, like the initial cost of buying the cells and installing it, is the biggest cost to that system. And of course, the investment cost is quite significant. And if the cells are there for 20, 50 years, you can get a lot of electricity from that, and it can be significantly actually cheaper than the electricity from the grid. But it's the initial cost that you have to put a significant amount of money to get the system initially, compared to buying the electricity from the grid at a certain cost.
So the problem really is that individuals and governments aren't willing to make that initial investment.
Especially if there are rough economical times, it might not be feasible or simple to make such investments.
So to a societal question, do you think that governments should support individuals in helping them buy solar panels?
Maybe to some extent to get the progress growing, but at the moment the cost of solar cells is going down so significantly that, for instance, in Italy, if the solar electricity is already at the same level as grid electricity, it's a debatable question should the government in addition support it.
Okay, great. So I've heard some talk, or some even experts say that we should maybe take Sahara and just build a massive energy plant there, a solar energy plant. So what's your intake on that? Would that be a good idea? Could we transport the energy then from there to places where the sun doesn't always shine, for instance, Finland?
that idea has its merits, because of course Sahara is uninhabited, we cannot grow anything there, and the sun shines all the time basically, so we can have a great production there. But sometimes you have to also consider that you have to transport the electricity to the consumer, so it might be actually more beneficial to have the solar cell, for instance, in the roof of Italian home, and where the electricity is used directly rather than have it exported.
Yeah, I've understood that the transportation is actually quite problematic, and I've heard statistics that for each 1,000 kilometers of transportation, there's about a 10% energy loss. So would that be something about accurate?
That sounds about right. But also you have to take into account this kind of countries don't like to be dependent on other countries. So this kind of national and local production of electricity is more secure also. So that's also one aspect to consider when thinking about building more photovoltaics.
Energy security.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about the life cycle of solar panels. How long does a solar panel typically last if you put it on your roof?
Well, the good panels should last something like 20 years, but there are some companies which have already given guarantees for 50 years. And you also might notice that the guarantees to the time where the cell has lost 10% of its production capability. But if I would have solar cells which produce 80% of their initial production, I would still very much use them, and they don't become useless at the time when they have when they are not stable anymore, but they can often still be used with very high efficiency.
So if I understood you correctly, if a company says that the solar panel will last for 20 years, it means that after 20 years it will still produce 90% of the energy that it's supposed to
Most
produce.
Most likely, yes. So if there hasn't been any critical failure in ceilings or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it will produce solar electricity for a very long time.
And then you mentioned that there's some panels that last for even 50 or 100 years. So how does a customer know what's a good quality panel?
There are these kind of certificates that certain manufacturers have gotten from independent laboratories, and they can then guarantee for the consumer that the cell will last in such and such conditions a given time, let's say 20 years.
Great. So other than solar panels, there's also other products, or what I mean, there's products maybe in backpacks. They might have some solar panels that you can charge your cell phone with and so forth. So what's your intake on other products other than the ones that you would actually be putting on your roof? Should one get products like that? Are they beneficial?
Depends on the use. For instance, of course, adding a solar cell on your backpack, if you like hiking, it gives off-grid usage of some electricity products. But actually, if you look at how much that kind of products produce energy due to their lifetime, it's kind of compared to the amount of energy used to preparing them. So in that kind of cases, you need to be careful if it's actually green power anymore. But if you look on these long-term installations, they're one of the greenest ways to produce energy.
Okay, so one final question. Solar panels have been developing very fast in the past. So why should one invest in solar energy now rather than wait for, let's say, 3 or 5 years for the technology to improve?
At the moment, the consumers are buying the conventional technologies which can reach a certain lifetime and efficiency. So most likely, if you would be buying something in 3 or 5 years, you would be still buying that kind of technology. And in those terms, we are not looking on huge leaps of technology anymore. So the price might be going down, but it depends. So there has been recent developments on the cost of electricity, solar electricity. So depending on, are you still looking for a much cheaper cost, or will you be buying it at these prices? But if in my region, for instance, the photovoltaic power would be already cheaper than the power from the grid, I would already buy the solar cells.
Great. Hey, thank you very much for your questions. I'm looking forward to listening to your lecture.